photopopper. They've got lots of different names, but in essence I think this one is a nice name, right? It's a nice sort of tinge to it, photopopper. So we're going into the realms of micro-robots now, and with micro-robots, and you'll see from some of those web links that we are talking about things which are about that big. Mike, can you give me a couple of page emojis, please? What to get those? We're talking about something about that kind of size. The solar panels that we have are quite generous in size, and this is 4.7 volt, I think, about 100 milliamps peak, which is a lot when we're talking about moving these tiny little robots. We would find ourselves in situations where, you know, just the ambient room lighting, you would probably be getting about 2.2 volts out of this, something like that. But the amount of current that you're getting out of it would not even run these directly. And these are the little vibrating motors that make your phone vibrate, because they've got an eccentric disc on there, which as it spins, it does the bit. So obviously in your phone, they're trying to conserve power. If we take two of these motors and we mount them kind of at 90 degrees to one another, and we place the robot on a smooth surface, preferably, as the motors go round, the robot is going to kind of do an insect kind of thing. It's going to jiggle, but it's going to go forward a little bit. And that's the whole idea of it. But if I connect that to it, in ambient room light, that's not going to have enough power. And what's power? Current times voltage, right? So it'll have enough voltage to drive the motor, but it won't have enough current to drive the motor. So you won't have enough power. It'll just collapse the supply. That will collapse that 0.1 of a volt or something, and that motor won't go round. I can throw money at the problem because I can put it on the windowsill, nice sunny day, point the panel at it, and then both the motors will go round, no problem at all. That's fine, but it means my photopopper will only work in absolutely extreme bright daylight. The other thing I can do is I can go and see Malcolm, and this is, we've got a lamp in there that's about 200 watts, and we test these on it. So you can, in your test phase, put a huge, great artificial light over the top of the panel, and that will generate enough power to be able to power both those motors, no problem at all. But what we want to achieve is we want to put this just on this table here, or somewhere well away from the windows, in a room just with fluorescent lights, or preferably in a room with no fluorescent lights at all, just with the light that's coming through the window. Now that's a pretty tough challenge, because I've already said there isn't enough power coming from this to be able to drive those motors. So we have to do something which is a little bit more subtle. Can anyone suggest anything? No ideas? We can store it, yes. We're in a realm now which is called ultra-low power. And one of the problems that we suffer from with ultra-low power is we don't even have enough power to be able to drive the load. So surely we can't drive anything, right? So I can connect those motors to that solar panel, leave it on the desk there, and remember what work is. You should remember from your physics days. That will sit there and will do absolutely no work whatsoever. So I've built a machine that doesn't do any work, so therefore it's not a machine, it's useless. Somebody said storage. So on ultra low power, one of the things that we can do is we can store. Now, storing is analogous to, I'd quite like a Ferrari, but I can't afford one. So what could I do? What strategy could I have? I could put some money in the bank for 10 years, and then I could go and buy that Ferrari, or I could then drive it for about half an hour until I'd used a tank of petrol, and then I would be broke, and then I'd have to save up some more to buy some petrol and more insurance. But nevertheless, I could have and drive that Ferrari, right? So I could save. I could store it up, but of course, at the point where my bank account has enough in to be able to go and buy the Ferrari, I take all the money out all in one go. And I spend it all in one go in a very short period of time. Well, that's exactly what you can do with this kind of idea. So what I could do is, if I got my solar panel here, what I could do with my solar panel, just bear in mind it's DC coming out of here, what I could do is I could then put it straight onto a capacitor. So I feed it directly into a capacitor. I don't need to steer it with diodes or anything, because these things quite like driving capacitors for reasons I can explain to you about the makeup of them on the silicon and everything, if you want to talk to me about that. Okay, so if I take a capacitor, and here is one, only this is no ordinary capacitor, this is a super capacitor. Doesn't mean to say it's got S on its chest and flies across the room, although it probably would if you short terminals out on full charge. What this means is it's got a very, very high power density for a very small package. So there's 1 farad in there, which is almost unheard of. So 1 farad, and there is an equation which says that I is equal to C times dV by dt. So if I discharge, so that's it's 1 farad, 1 unit. So if I discharge that in 1 second, I get an amp. So if I discharge that, that will give me 1 amp for 1 second. But things get better, because if I discharge it in half a second, I get 2 amps. If I discharge it in a quarter of a second, I get 4 amps. 1/8 of a second, 8 amps, and so on and so on and so forth. So in other words, if I discharge that over a very short period of time, I could get hundreds of amps coming from that. And that's what capacitors do really well, is they are in a position to provide high current. Now remember that that wasn't the case with this. Voltage, not too much of a problem. It'll sort of jump up to 1.8 to 2.2, something like that, but it can't drive current. So we store it into here, and what we see is slowly but surely we rise up here. So we have the classic charging curve, and this is the V that we would see on the capacitor, and this is time that we would see here. Okay, so that capacitor would slowly but surely charge. So now I've got a capacitor that might be charged up, so say that's 4.7, I like that number. Charged up to 4.7 volts, and over here I've got a motor. So what I could do is I could take the wires from that motor and connect them across the capacitor, and the capacitor would drive the motor, and you're welcome to try that experiment. I'll show you how to do it if you want. Connect it across there, and the motor would run for some considerable time. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe longer. So jumping that across there is okay, but it's not automatic. What we want is we want a circuit which makes that decision for us. Let's just slightly redraw this. So the kind of schematic thing that we'd like to see here is we'd like to see this, a switch in here, and we'd like the switch to close when, so we just write close if cap equals 3 volts. That's what we'd like to be able to achieve. So we might have to wait for a minute, 2 minutes, something like that, for that capacitor to reach its charge. And what we want is a circuit which closes the switch and allows the current to flow through the motor at the point when we've reached the threshold voltage, magic word there, threshold. Okay? That's what the photopopper circuits are all about. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, switch them off, and we'll have a look at some of the circuits a bit now.